Welcome to Scoreography, your accessible and enthusiastic celebration of the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I am your host, Wendy Buskey, a lifelong skating fanatic, and I'm here with my co-host and husband, Adrian Buskey.
Who is, I guess, what you could call a recent convert to skating, but really it's more like 10 or 14 years or something. So I guess that's not really that recent.
You count as a fan.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but for you, it's been like 40 years. And for me, it's been...
Rude. I'm kidding.
For you, it's been like a few decades.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been like a decade and a half. But yeah, this episode is a little bit late because we intended to put out one right after the MK John Wilson Trophy in England. And for a variety of reasons, we weren't able to. So this is a two-for episode. We're going to be talking about two different Grand Prix events.
Right. We're going to talk about essentially what is the Grand Prix of England in Sheffield. That was the first of its kind in England. And then the NHK Trophy that just happened last weekend in Japan.
Right. So these are both events on the ISU Grand Prix. The one in England apparently was such a success for them there in England that they're going to be trying to do more figure skating events and doing a lot more out of that facility. So that's a big deal for them.
It is. And it's really fun to see. And I will say that other than maybe Skate America, no, to be fair, Skate Canada as well, it was a really ruckus crowd. I felt like they were enthusiastic and very supportive, and particularly whenever people were having bad skates, which happened fairly often, they were really trying to keep people going. But I think also beyond just the fact that we're talking about these two in particular competitions, it's a good time to take a step back and look at the Grand Prix so far this season, because it's definitely been interesting.
Yeah, so we're not going to go as like individual by individual discussion.
No need to get deep in the weeds.
Right, because I think contrasting these last two events, the previous three in the Grand Prix were Skate America, Skate Canada, Skate France, which I know Skate France is like, it's actually a full name, but that's,
France.
Yeah, that's what we'll refer to it for the time being. Looking at the one in Sheffield, which was the MK John Wilson Trophy, and then the NHK in Japan. It is interesting, like the English crowd was raucous and loud and enthusiastic. In Japan, figure skating is huge. And I mean, it is like
it's like the NBA.
Right. Yeah. Like Johnny always says that people follow it like they follow the NFL here. It's a very big sport there. But the crowds are so polite.
Yeah. I mean, it's Japan and it's the culture of it, but it is enthusiastic, supportive, but in polite applause type of ways. But it's a little different from whenever we're watching Yuzu. Like when Yuzu or Hanyu is out in Japan, things get wild. But yeah, it definitely was a slightly different tone.
Yeah.
But a full crowd, and I don't know. It's weird because those two competitions, just to get into it, felt like they blended together quite a lot. And to be honest, so did France. The three competitions overall, Skate America and Skate Canada both had this like, you felt the momentum starting to pick up.
Yeah.
You had the excitement behind it. France was okay. I mean, just to be honest, like I think other than like Lona Hendricks and maybe Yaelin Kim there and maybe the Italian dance team, I don't feel like much is memorable. However, looking at the last two Grand Prix in England and in Japan, very little was memorable out of either of them.
It's kind of weird looking because I think in like Skate France, like the tops of the podium were very impressive and very, very cool. But once you got off the podium, and even sometimes bronze and below, there just wasn't that much to think or talk about. But it was still an enjoyable event. I think, and I've seen this echoed in some other places, that like Sheffield was weirdly boring, even as much as it was a big success there. And there were some really terrific skates.
Absolutely.
There. The event just didn't end up being very memorable, at least for me. We're recording this again, like, a week and a half out from it. And a lot of it's just already gone from my mind.
It's really interesting because I feel like the ice dance was the only thing that really stood out to me because the competition felt worthwhile, where you had Lila Fear and Lewis Gibson from Britain skating on home ice, did a brilliant job. They had one little bobble and ended up in second, but they played to the crowd. It was obviously a very big deal for them. You could feel it. You could see it. You could see the crowd was just deeply in love with them. So that was wonderful. But they came in second to the Italian team that also won Skate France, putting them kind of at the head of the ice dance discipline for the Grand Prix overall in the series. So going into the Grand Prix final, they're going to be at the top. Well, we still have one more. So Gilles and Poirier from Canada may take that or be tied. In any case, that was memorable. Both of those teams did a really great job. But frankly, the rest of it, like you said, there were some really good performances. Denis Vasiliev stands out as a very memorable long program, and he had such a rough time at Skate Canada.
So it was a disaster at Skate Canada.
It was so bad.
Yeah.
Seeing him flip the script and really come through and skate an emotional performance that you could tell that he was fighting for everything, that he was, every bit of himself was coming through on that. The one person who beat him was Daniel Grassel, who is not as artistic of a skater as Denis Vasiliev. So I think emotionally, Vasiliev definitely took it there. But Daniel Grassel came through again. Like, he really did prove, like, hey, he's improving. His technical is getting better. His artistic is getting better. Still has a lot of work to do. But this is his first Grand Prix win. And that's wonderful for him. So it's really good to see. But the ladies' competition, you had Isabel Levito, very strong again, basically making her mark, especially on the component side, really making sure it's very, very clear that she is a front runner and a podium threat, honestly, for Worlds. But she's going to have to defeat everyone from Japan and Korea. And at this competition, Mai Mihara got her and was the gold medalist, very well deserved. But as much as I really enjoyed both of them, and I thought they did a great job, and you had other people at that competition like Ekaterina Kurakova and Young Yu, it just was not a memorable competition. The crummy thing about it is that I think the thing that stood out most about the ladies' competition was poor Brady Tennell, who was absolutely 100% not ready to be back on the ice. It was nice to see her trying, but she was under rotating everything. She fell repeatedly. You have to start somewhere. And I appreciate that she got the opportunity to do it on a Grand Prix. But at the same time, it was painful to watch. And I feel bad. It's not a good thing to say that the most memorable thing was a comeback that is going to be hard. And that's the thing that stood out.
Last episode, I talked about the fact that I've never been a Brady Tennell fan, and not as a knock on her personally. I think she's, as much as I know about her, she seems like a fine, outstanding young person. But I've never liked her skating. But also, like, I mean, I felt the same way about Gracie in her prime. I was never a fan of Gracie Gold, and with her in her comeback, I'm rooting for her because I want to see her get that redemption arc that she seems to be striving for. With Brady, the pieces were not there. I liked her look on the ice was a little different. I liked that the way she was presenting some things didn't feel like classic Brady. They felt like Brady 2.0. And for that, I'm here for it. But yeah, she just was not ready for a Grand Prix. It was blatant with that. You know, when you talk about the podium there, though, even some of the people that we really like Young Yu and Katerina Kurakova, who both turned in good skates, but not to their level. And I think Young Yu was not well at that competition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they weren't particularly memorable skates. Even Isabeau's skates weren't up to her usual caliber either.
Yeah, I am a regular viewer of The Skating Lesson, and I was watching, if you're not familiar with it, check it out on YouTube. It's a fun figure skating gossipy show, and I enjoy it, and they get really deep into the details, and I appreciate that. But I watched them and they mentioned something that really comforted me because it's the same thing I felt, which was they only watched, or at least one of them had only watched one of the pairs in that competition because they had just found themselves getting distracted by their phones and just losing interest. And they are super fans. Like, they are deep into figure skating.
These people are, they are professional skaters, and one of them is. The other one's an opera singer.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, they live and breathe this stuff, and they were tuning out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the worst. It's they care so much and they couldn't care. And to me, hearing that comforted me because I'm like, okay, I felt the same way through most of this competition. And I love watching this stuff. I just couldn't get excited. And kind of leading that into NHK in Japan this past week, it wasn't that much different. I was really excited to see Chock and Bates come back into their second Grand Prix after Skate America's. They won, which was great, but the programs were not so great. And they had a lot of problems. And it's really easy to say that okay, it's the first time this season. And that's how I was looking at it and trying to be optimistic. But the more I've gone back and thought about those and analyzed those programs, it more just felt like they're just falling flat. That's also disappointing because they are my current favorite dance team. And I really, honestly, at the beginning of this season, it felt like they had a strong opportunity to take the world title. And watching them so far in the Grand Prix, it's really iffy. It just feels much more like, and for NHK Trophy to be specific, they have obviously gotten that feedback because they have reworked their long program
in a significant way. I mean, the entire concept of the free skate was originally basically the tale of their love story.
Yeah, and her engagement ring.
And that didn't work. And that kind of thing doesn't surprise me. There's sometimes, I mean, art is very, very deeply personal, but I think sometimes when people try to apply that very surface, like it's our story on ice, or in a lot of other artistic forms, sometimes it just doesn't work when you try to do that one-to-one literal interpretation. So what they did was take that particular piece, I think, put a whole new piece of music to it.
I think it's somewhere in between. It's maybe a different mix of the same. It's a fire and ice and how they need each other type of concept. So now it's a much more character-driven piece, which is what they're known for.
Yeah, and it's okay.
It's okay. And now I can at least say, I'll give it this. It is definitely better than the first iteration, but it needs a lot of polish. And it doesn't have the wow moment. It has some really beautiful lifts. The twizzle sequences are nice. And there's some nice choreographic elements in between. And overall, it's good. It's just not wow. And at their level, you expect wow. Every one of their like long programs for the past few years, whether it was the program that they did last year, the Spaceman and the Alien, like very deep character work. A lot of judges really didn't like it, but I thought it was brilliant. And also, man, does Madison Chock sell a character?
Yeah.
And then you always talk about the Snake Charmer program where she's amazing. I mean, Evan is an incredible skater and a great partner. They have always played so well into that thematic idea. And this just feels like they're skating to music.
It doesn't feel like there's a hook.
It doesn't feel like there's a hook. There's no wow moment. I don't know. There's just something missing. And it's almost like this unquantifiable, like, where's the thing that means that this isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can tell the judges are not feeling it either because they came in second to the Canadian team that they're like really good friends with and they train with, but they're not even the top Canadian team in the world. They're not Gilles and Poirier. It's Lawrence Fournier Beaudry and Nikolai Sorensen. And they're fantastic skaters. They're top, I think they were in the top 8 at the Olympics. They're very good. They got their personal best and did fantastically. But even they seemed surprised.
They shouldn't be a threat to Chock and Bates.
Not at this
stage
time.
of their career and history. Yeah.
And it's great whenever teams make a big stride forward and you can see it. But it was very much equal parts. They took a step forward and Chock and Bates definitely took a step back. I felt like it was a judge message of we don't like this.
Yeah.
And that's a bad sign at this point in the season.
Well, also, and I will say that, like, I'm a Chock and Bates super fan.
You are.
And I watched that free skate. And if I had not already been a fan of them, if I didn't know who they were and I just watched that skate, I would watch it and go, oh, they're very good. And I would never remember it.
Nope.
Like you said before, it doesn't have the wow factor.
It does not.
And there's something that I think about a lot with this, that I hear Tara Lipinski echoing in my head, which is that this is the season to go for the throat.
Yes.
This is the season to come in with a ferocity to take the reins because so many of the big players have retired after the last Olympic quad cycle.
Or at least are taking a time off.
Or in time off. So, because I mean, like, you know.
We don't know if Gabby and Guillaume aren't coming back. They might. And if they do, they will decimate.
Yeah, they will wreck everybody in their way. So while those players are out, this is the time to go for it. And in some of the, we talked about it, Skate America and Skate Canada, we saw some of those performances for people where they did feel like they came in teeth out, ready to hungry to make their way in this and to establish that they're the main players. And I feel like in England and in Japan, we saw a lot less of that.
We did.
We saw a lot of tentative performances. We saw a lot of
tight performances.
Tight or sloppy. And then, we had performances that there were a lot of people who showed up and had extraordinary short programs and then blew the free skates and stuff like that too.
Star Andrews broke my heart a little bit in that long program.
Yeah. So let's transition off of Chock and Bates then here and talk about a few of those performances after these last couple, because especially at NHK, we saw a couple of the American women falter. After Skate Canada, where we saw Star Andrews just shine and land on the podium, at Skate America, where we saw Amber Glenn she took bronze, but she was fantastic.
At Skate America, she was fantastic. And at NHK,
a completely different skater showed up. And I felt awful for her because she just couldn't put it together. Neither of her programs even felt like they had when they were at Skate America. It just felt like a completely different skater showed up on the ice. I mean, she talked about it in the post interviews that she was embarrassed by the short skate. And I don't know much about after the long other than she can't have been happy with it. The one silver lining is that she did land a certified triple axel.
It was her first ratified international triple axel. Even though she double footed it, that's fine. It was fully rotated. It's something to take away. Star Andrews had a really solid short program.
Her short program was great, yeah.
And she was in the same position that she had been in at Skate Canada in 5th going into the long program, which for her was, that she turned that into silver at Skate Canada. That's fantastic. Here, the long program, it wasn't as bad as Amber Glenn's, but it still landed her in 9th place. Mostly it was just upsetting because it wasn't that any part of it was like point your finger and go, oh. It was more you could tell that she was scared. You could feel her being in her head. And scared might not be even the right word to use. It's just, you could feel how tight and tense and uneasy in her own skin she seemed out there on the ice.
Well, a lot of discussion that I saw online was talking about how when she got that silver at Skate Canada, she was the first Black American woman to win a Grand Prix medal.
Yeah, which is an enormous, wonderful, well, let me put it this way. It's amazing and wonderful that she did. It's terrible that it took this long.
There's always that double-edged sword of any of those types of things where it's like, awesome that you did it, totally messed up that it hasn't happened before.
Right.
But she got a lot of media attention.
She did.
About
which is
that.
Great.
It is great, but Star has struggled in the past with being the person who has to not just be a great skater, but also has to be a representative.
Right.
Because Black women and Black men are so completely rare and underrepresented in the American system and in skating in general. So you don't get to just go out there and just be you. And also she's saddled with the name Star. So she's always had to struggle with the expectation that you live up to your name and also people treating it like a joke if you don't succeed. And that's a lot to put on her shoulders when really she just needs to go out there and be herself and just have a good skate. And it just felt like the pressure at Japan kind of took it out of her a little bit.
But I also felt the same, not to the same degree, but with Rinka Watanabe, who had done so brilliantly at Skate Canada, won her first Grand Prix. I have total faith that Rinka is going to come through and be back at Worlds. She will do well at Japan Nationals. I am a fan of Rinka Watanabe, but her short program was rough. And she even said, like, skating at home after some success, it's just a lot of pressure, especially in Japan, where it is such a big deal. She came through much stronger in the long program, ended up 5th overall. So it's not, a complete loss. But at the same time, after winning Skate Canada and really looking like a medal contender for world podium, which I still think she is, it was just a rough go. But the same could be said for our queen, Kaori Sakamoto. It wasn't as bad, but her short program was rough. And her long program was gorgeous. It's just such a good program. I love the choreography. It might be it's easily one of my favorites of the season. Absolutely love it.
Her Elastic Heart free program is absolutely one of my favorite things in this season. And it's so good on her. But she had one struggle in one of the combinations.
Her combinations were failing her.
And she popped a jump and at her very, very last jump, which you could see she was furious about.
Oh yeah, like if you are able to find this program anywhere online, the thumbnail is likely to be her grasping her head and looking angry. It's like she was so upset.
And that pop jump probably lost her the gold.
It did. It absolutely did, because gold medal went to Yaelin Kim, who is a wonderful skater, beautiful skater. It's tough because Cowrie did win the long program.
Yeah.
But she only lost overall by less than 3 points, I think. A pop jump, the miss on one of the combinations, or just overall, like, for all that she is her trademark is her speed and being so free and aggressive and just skating almost in a wild fashion. It's completely her own and completely unique. But she just didn't quite have that, and especially in the short. In the long, I felt all of that feeling from her with just a little bit more hesitation.
Yeah, Cowrie's speed was not there with her in the short, but it was there with her in the long.
It was.
Again, Yaelin Kim beat her in the short, but Kim did not have a clean free skate.
No.
She fell several times. Also, the whole women's competition in the free skate was just almost every person had a pop jump. Almost every one of the women did. It was a rough skate for an awful lot of them.
No, yeah. I mean, the whole competition was kind of littered with them. But we did see a really nice performance from Audrey Shin from the US. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah, I think, was she at Skate France? Like, is that the previous time?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And I think she actually placed the exact same.
Yeah, I think she did. And when we watched,
to be specific.
Yeah, when we watched her there, we talked about her star power. Like, she's got the thing.
She does.
She just needs the technical and a little bit more consistency, but she has that thing on ice.
And I think she's got such beautiful line, and she's a beautiful skater. I just want her to, like, go a little more hard, be a little more aggressive. I feel like she's stable. She is solid, but I don't want her to be the one who is stable, solid, and stays right in the mids. She could be a star. Like, she could really move up onto that US podium. She's just got to hit it just a little harder.
Yeah. But I think that in international competition now, she has really showed up twice, not podium, but against some really strong competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And you also look, when you had your two veterans in Amber Glenn and Star Andrews, who both came in hot from really strong previous performances, and Audrey beat both of them. Granted, both of them had bad skates, but she showed up and she did well.
Well, she's showing consistency, which she and Isabeau Levito have been the most consistent on seeing this Grand Prix season so far.
Yeah. So I'm excited.
For anyone who's done more than one.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to see what else Audrey Shin does going forward. Also, just want to mention that the bronze out of that was Rion Sumiyoshi. This is her first senior season, and she's been very, very exciting to watch. She's ended up with 2 bronze podium positions. She has a quad. She hasn't landed it cleanly yet in competition. And she definitely did not land it cleanly at NHK.
She had a terrifying fall.
Yeah, it was really scary, and it was impressive that she shook it off. Certainly, again, not super clean skates, but she has a really high technical overall.
I think she is, for lack of a better term, she is a one to watch type of person. She is going to show up for the next 4 years. I feel like she's definitely on that radar of, okay, you have something going on there. And I wouldn't put her in the category of an Ilya Malinin just yet, but at the same time, she's in that same category of these young stars that are just putting their toe in the water and really showing up quick.
Yeah, and I think Rion, she has very interesting lines. She's got a fierceness on ice. She definitely landed higher on the podium than she was expecting to based on her performances. She could be somebody who could compete legitimately with the Russians whenever they return, depending on if she can get those jumps consistent. But she's really nice to watch. And you've talked a lot about how, like, the Japanese whole program is deep and they're all unique. Every one of them is so radically different one to the next. And Rion is right in that thing. We're like just so dissimilar from all the rest of our countrymen.
I'm really curious to see what comes out of Japan Nationals. You have a pretty solid idea of who's going to be on that podium for the men. For the women, it could really go a lot of different ways. I mean, Cowrie is your gold standard, and even she has a win and a second place. She's into the Grand Prix final, and unless she completely falls apart, they will bring her to Worlds. And honestly, even if she does fall apart, they might just push her through anyway because she's the world champion. But the other two is a crapshoot. I really was like, okay, it's obviously going to be Rinka. And now I'm like, oh, not.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women.
Yeah.
The men, I'm going to start at the top because I am team Shoma.
Yeah.
Shoma's my guy.
Yeah.
And my God, I love his programs this year so hard. But even he had problems in the short program. His gravity program, I love. It keeps getting better. From Skate Canada to NHK, we were just talking about the fact that there weren't many memorable programs. Like, I can't point and say, this is a really great one. No. That his gravity program, his short program this year, spectacular. Even though he had a mistake, the quality of it's so freaking high.
Yeah.
And his long program, he had a few minor errors, but just in a different category. He won by, I'm looking at the numbers here, almost 20 points.
It was an interesting thing to watch at the end of that, at the end of the NHK with Shoma, because he was, he decimated the competition. But we could still look at those scores and say, okay, but Nathan Chen,
I know.
in some of his best days, beat that number by like
40
points. Yeah.
We're slowly building up to it.
Right.
We'll see. And Shoma has topped, I believe, I'm going to eat my words later. I'll do a fact check. I'm pretty sure he's topped over 300 points. He only hit about 280 at NHK. So he has room with this program because, he did have a few mistakes. Technically, no one is in the Nathan Chen, Yuzuru Hanyu scoring range right now. But out of what's out there, nobody's touching Shoma just yet.
Nobody's close, yeah.
Again, with the Japanese possibilities, the depth of their field, your second place was Sota Yamamoto, who was excellent. He did a great job and silver medal at this Grand Prix was unexpected, but totally deserved. I thought he did a great job, but I don't expect him, unless it's an upset, because you have Shoma Uno, you have Kamiura, who has really made a name for himself so far this season on the Grand Prix. And unless he has a real bad day, I totally expect him to make it. And then if he's not injured, you have Yuma Kageyama, who is the only person who can defeat, in my opinion, Shoma at Worlds this year.
Yeah.
If Yuma Kageyama is back and at full throttle, Shoma might actually have a threat. So for all that, whenever you're watching a lot of these competitions, especially in the United States, like all you're hearing about is Ilya Malinin. And understandably, he landed a damn quadruple axel, which is mind blowing. He ain't beating those two guys unless they screw up.
Well, or unless he goes out there and skates completely clean and just beats them in technical.
That's fair, but I still don't. If all three of those guys are clean, he's still not winning, because they can, especially Shoma, but Yuma as well, they can destroy him with skating skills at this point. And that is not an insult to Ilya Malinin. He is a fantastic skater, and seeing him last season versus this season,
huge change.
Huge improvement.
But he is a technical, athletic jumper skater.
Right. And he can do things literally no one else can do. But Shoma Uno is a complete skater. He is a well-rounded skater. He can do 5 quads in a program and also be a complete artist and have all the edge work and have beautiful spins. He is the well-rounded athlete who will defeat Ilya if they're both clean. Now, if Shoma screws up, Malinin can totally come in and take that. It's looking at a lot of the other, like just going back to the Japanese teams, it's like they had the top 2 guys, but then they also had Kazuki Tomono, who didn't make the podium but was close, and he can sneak in. So it's just amazing to me when I look at how many on that side of things. The Japan Nationals might actually be more interesting than Worlds. Like, honestly.
What this makes me think of here, we look at the men's category, especially with the Japanese skaters and some of the Korean skaters.
Oh yeah, like Junwon Cha was fantastic in the long program and ended up with a bronze here.
And we have, Ilya, and there's a few other male skaters that are fairly strong in it right now. The women's competition is actually pretty deep because of, again, Japan, Korea, and a handful of Americans and Lona Hendricks and people like that. But then we look over at the discipline that is pairs.
Oh, I don't know if I want to look for NHK. I want to look because my favorite skaters of the current season won NHK, and that's Riko Miura and Ruguchi Kihara from Japan. And I love them so hard. I just want them to skate all the time. And I don't really need a pairs competition. I just need them.
Well, they are my current of this season. They are my favorite skaters. They are
Easily,
like their routines
hands
are
down.
my favorite thing. Their long program
Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
is gorgeous. And they were fantastic in Japan. I adore them. We've talked about this a lot already, that like
we are fanning out over them every time they're on.
Right. But besides them, pairs, you've got them, you've got Alexa and Brandon,
who won the Sheffield in England. They won the Grand Prix of England.
Right. They won the Grand Prix of England, and they also won Skate America. So, the Americans are in good shape there. And then you have the Canadian team that's been a breakout this season. But really, outside of that, pairs just doesn't have anything going on.
Pairs is just, it's strange. NHK Trophy, for instance, only had 6 teams competing. That's nothing. Usually you have 6 teams per group in the practice. It's very odd. And it's definitely that thing that it's not something you can't. If you're paying attention at all to skating and you have paid attention to it ever, you can't not notice it. It's upsetting because you're really seeing there are maybe 3 teams that are vying for podium. Where they'll land, who knows? But I think it's a pretty solid 1-2 punch with Japan and the United States, with the Canadians solidly in place to step up for a bronze, unless teams screw up. And then everyone else is like 20 points behind them, at least, if not much farther behind. And then it's really just the number of teams.
There's just very few.
There's very few. And again, going back to some recent viewing of the skating lesson, they brought up something I wasn't really aware of, which is that whenever you look to the juniors and to the even beyond, like to novice levels, there's not a lot coming up. Usually if you have a thin few years, you can be like, okay, but there's more people waiting in the wings. There aren't, because pairs just isn't popular. It's not that hot right now. And
it's weird because pairs was really, really popular, say like around 2000.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the biggest things going. And now it's just
the
not.
most athletic of all the disciplines.
It's the most dangerous of the disciplines.
Absolutely. It's the most dangerous. It's very bizarre and it's concerning because it is that feeling of, okay, if you only have 3 teams that are worth watching, how much is that inspiring the next generation to want to walk into that discipline? How many are raising their hand and saying, hey, I really want to be in pairs? Of course they don't. They want to be single skaters, or really they want to be ice dancers. Ice dancers are aplenty right now. And to the point where now even solo dance is becoming a more internationally recognized sport, where pairs is just fallen apart. And if you know anything about how the Olympics work, there is a certain point where if you don't have enough countries participating in a sport, it goes away. I don't think we're in danger of that right now, but if this continues, I don't know, it could happen. And that's me conjecturing. This is not fact-based in the sense that I have words to follow that up. But what it is based in is that Olympic rule does exist, and we've seen other sports get eliminated. For a long time, curling was out of the Olympics because not enough countries were doing it.
I do want to step back to something you said there, which was that anybody coming up in skating would look at pairs and just not find it exciting and be like, well, that's not where I want to be. I want to be where the action is. But I think the flip side of that is that if you have a lot of mid-tier skaters that are skating solo and struggling, they're just not able to reach that podium level in their competition. If they were smart, and I know that this is a wild change to somebody's career trajectory, but the opportunity is in pairs.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially at the beginning of an Olympic quad. We have 4 years till the next Olympics. If you are somebody who is consistently in the 6 to 8 range in your zone in your country or whatever, like in competition.
And you have a fearless streak, I'll say, because you think about the lifts they have to do.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's certainly pairs is not for for the men, they have to have extraordinary strength. For the women, they have to have extraordinary endurance to deal with, and
strength, endurance, and fearlessness.
Yeah, bravery to be able to be picked up and thrown through the air.
Yeah.
Certainly, it can be terrifying, and we've seen some scary stuff happen on ice with pairs. But this is a zone where, because of the way pairs sort of matches, it kind of combines single and ice dance into a single discipline. The expectations for the difficulties of the jumps is lower. Nobody's doing quads in
quad throws, but those aren't really valued that highly. So a lot of people don't do them.
Right. And, you know, the side by side jumps and stuff like that, you know, you're rarely seeing some, you know, a pair throw out a triple axel or anything
Never.
like that. Like never. So if you're a skater who maybe doesn't have the triple axel, maybe can't quite get to the quads, but you have good skating skills, you have the strength, the fearlessness, all of those things, pairs is probably the best possible avenue towards an Olympic success for a person who is in that
100%
area of it.
It's definitely something I've thought about a lot with a lot of skaters whenever they sort of age out of singles. I mean, it's Deanna Stellato of Canada. She's proving the point. Like, she was a singles skater in the United States and then left the sport for, I don't know, 9-10 years, something like that. And then decided to come back in pairs because pair skaters tend to be older. And it's great. It gives them a whole new depth of like performance value because they're not kids anymore. They have a lot of different qualities to offer, and they have a much longer potential for a career as a competitor in pairs. If they're interested in figuring out if they're good at it and they end up being good at it, it's a huge opportunity. It's a wide open lane right now for somebody to walk into. Yeah, you're totally right. It could be very exciting.
The skating rumor mill has kind of indicated that there are a few skaters. Like I've heard that Gabby Izzo has kind of
rumblings.
Is poking around saying, hey, like, is there
I'll
maybe
be curious to see if that's true. And it's, but yeah, she definitely is a great example. If that's the case, it would be completely fascinating to see someone who is currently in the top 10 ladies in seniors just kind of wander on over to pairs and see what happened. We've seen it before.
Yeah.
I think there could be a lot more of it. I think we've mentioned this on different episodes already, but it's what is the United States Figure Skating Association doing about it? Because they have to be aware. There's no doubt they are aware that this is a problem. How are they encouraging, incentivizing, and just generally nudging people towards that because they can't not know that their program's in trouble?
With Alexa and Brandon, the talk is that they weren't necessarily going to return after last season, that they were basically asked to return so that we could get somebody on the podium because they were the best.
We don't know that for sure.
This is the talk in the zone.
In the socials.
Right. But it kind of makes sense because it felt like they came in a little behind the curve.
They did. I mean, they and Chock and Bates, to be fair, were both behind the curve. Even though they both skated at Skate Canada, they were touring all summer and neither one of them looked prepared.
Yeah.
And they both mentioned that they were not as well trained as they wanted to be. It doesn't feel like they're just there because they want. I'm sure there's a lot of I want to be here and I want to be competing, but it also feels like for Lex and Brandon that there's a, hey, can you please stick around because we need you. The pairs discipline in the United States needs you really badly. And frankly, there's a wide open door for them to win another world medal, if not another world gold medal, because it's between them and the Japan team really right now. Something that someone said, and I align with it totally, that I saw on social, was just that you don't remember, unless you're a deep, deep super fan, how many people were competing against previous world champions. If you just look at the list of who won the worlds on X year, that's what you see. It's not, and here's the 20 other teams that didn't happen to show up.
Yeah.
Like forever and ever, Alexa and Brandon can say 2022 world champions, period. And for the ones in the know, they'll know that Russia wasn't there and China wasn't there. But for most casual fans, all they'll see is world champions. And that's an unbelievable thing for a team that's only been together a few years out of the United States. So them having not come back would have been really kind of devastating to the United States team, like Figure Skating Association.
Right. But especially when you're trying to vie for spots in worlds and all that stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your spots.
Right. But also just to keep the franchise going. Yeah. And right now, when you always talk about like skating in general always talks about the heir apparent, right? It's like
Yeah.
Isabel Levito is our new queen, Ilya Malinin is our quad god. Like we still have Chock Bates like as leading the ice dance. You needed somebody in there.
You needed a marquee
because you didn't have it otherwise. And they're like, even for a season, we need some of that until somebody else can step up to it.
Absolutely.
And but again, Pairs is wide open. This is the opportunity for people who are looking ahead for the next 3 years.
It is definitely the biggest opportunity area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places to go.
So beyond all that, the next thing we have coming up is Finland, Skate Finland.
Yep, the last one.
Yeah, that's the end of the Grand Prix before the...
Yep, that's the sixth one. And whatever comes out of this will name who is going to the Grand Prix final. Like a lot of people are already solidified, like Shoma Uno, Isabel Levito, and Chock Bates. They all know they're going. This is where we find out who gets bumped, who stays on the team that are in like the 5th and 6th positions. And I mean, there were a few like Lona Hendricks, who's going to be here, and Ilya Malinin. Ideally, you'll see them, hopefully, if they both skate as well as we expect them to, that they will bump people off of that are currently in the top 6 to go to the Grand Prix final. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, who else kind of shows up at this, because I'm particularly interested in seeing the dance, because Skate Canada's champions and the Canadian national champions, Piper Gillis and Poirier, are there. And I am not necessarily long-term fans of theirs, but their programs this season are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how well they do here, because if they do what they did at Skate Canada, I really think it puts them in the favorites for Worlds at this point. They were excellent. But we also have Kate Hawayek and Jean-Luc Baker from the United States, who I adore, and I really love their programs this year. So
their long program is dynamite. It's the best thing I've ever seen from them.
Absolutely.
And as far as I'm concerned, of all of the stuff I've seen in ice dance, it's my favorite long program this season.
I mean, if I'm being completely honest, if they go 1-2 at Finland, it's how I wish the world podium would go. They're so spot on. Really, the only people who are standing out to me in terms of the programs this year would be the two of them and Lila Fear and Lewis Gibson. I don't think that they have the same quality, our British team of Fear and Gibson, but they're fun and they're exciting and they're invested. They are there to fight, to be seen. And I really appreciate that. And just on a technical level, the Italian team is doing amazingly this season. I would put Hawayek and Baker over Chock and Bates right now.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, I don't know how it matches up with the technical.
Because I love both of them equally, but it's like...
But Jean-Luc and Kate's routines are better this season.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
In any event, we're going to be looking forward to Finland and see what's
looking forward to Finland.
What's going to happen there. As far as the rest of the American skaters, like the next thing for American skaters who are not going to be in the Grand Prix final is...
U.S. Nationals.
Is U.S. Nationals in January. So there's a ways to go. There's going to be some holes here in a little bit.
There's a hole, and it'll be interesting. And I'm kind of looking forward to taking some time in the next few episodes to kind of look back on some other stuff about skating, because we've been digging really deep into what's going on right now. But if you're a figure skating fan, you probably love to dig into your favorite programs or your favorite teams, or just some of your favorite moments of, you know, what has the tension points. I'm thinking things like when Johnny Weir versus Evan Lysacek, like things like that are just kind of more fun to dig into, because I don't know, they're a little simpler times.
Well, and if there's things you as a listener would like to hear us approach and discuss and dissect and
if you would like
fan
to
out
hear
about,
me talk about how I thought at 15 I could potentially find a way to marry Kurt Browning. No offense, honey. But that was definitely on my list of things that I wanted to do. If you want to hear us gush about how perfect Paul Wiley's skating is, happy to do it.
They'll hear you gush about, I like Paul Wiley's skating, but I've watched it like 4 times.
Perfect.
Yeah. You can hit us up. We're on the socials, so you can find us on Instagram and Twitter, and now on Hive, if that is your thing. And
if it's still a thing in a week,
it might not be. Who knows? It's the new thing that everybody's hopping to, but Hive seems kind of fun right now.
I like it.
But just because Twitter's a trash fire, and who knows if it'll even exist in a week or two. Thanks to Phony Stark, but.
Took me a beat.
Yeah, but you know who I'm talking
I know.
about. We are in all those places as at Scoreography. The website is scoreography.show, and you can reach out to us there as well. There's an email form. We're available on all the podcasting apps, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and we're also on YouTube.
Pod. Is that one? Pod.
Probably. There's Pod Say and Zencaster, and I don't know.
Don't quote me, but maybe Pod.
I don't know if we're on any of those yet. But yeah, sure, we're on Pod. I mean, if it exists, we're probably there. I don't know.
If you've made it this far, hello.
Hi. In any event, follow us on all those places. Reach out. Tell us what you want us to hear. Thank you for sticking around to the end of it here. And we will talk to you after Skate Finland. For Scoreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.